Okay. This is always awkward, comrades. First of all, I want to say good evening, and it feels good for us to be with you. And I have to say it on a sad note that we just learned today that somebody was hit by a bus, which doesn't surprise us because some of the conditions in Baltimore are incredibly bad. I mean, the city has not cleaned off any sidewalk around any of the MTA bus stops, and so that actually a number of us were saying this was bound to happen, that someone was going to get struck by a car or a bus, because people literally have to stand in the street to catch buses and that kind of stuff. So we were sort of in the eye of the storm. I realize that in many respects we've missed some of the most major storms. In New York's been hit. I remember that hurricane where y'all suffered the flooding and Baltimore wasn't touched. And while we're generally not on the weather map, in this case we were the bullseye of the storm. I think we asked for the title of Capitalism Has Failed the People of Flint, from Flint to Baltimore, and there's a real reason for it. The crisis here is man-made. It's not so much that, of course, storms are natural disasters, but even this storm, there's going to be an article, and maybe it's the issue of the paper will come out with it, that this storm, even the severity of it, is a product of global warming. And a lot of the ferociousness of storms and a lot of the weathers and the so-called natural disasters are not natural at all. They're man-made by the capitalist system. Let's be honest here, sisters and brothers and comrades. But Baltimore is a lot like Flint, too, in terms of the negligence and the criminality of the government. People probably have seen that people are calling for the governor to go to jail, which he should be jailed immediately in Michigan. Here, the city was, in many respects, because the crisis is obviously much bigger than Flint, but the criminality of the system isn't all that much different, and it has a lot to do with racism and national oppression, and the demands of reparations from Flint to Baltimore to Jackson, Mississippi, to Detroit, all hold true in all these cases. I have to say that it's important to paint a picture for people to understand a little bit of the background and what the People's Power Assembly did here. You know, the immediate reaction to this storm was sort of one of, well, let's not do anything, let's just hope everything will work out okay. I mean, that's one attitude. But the other attitude was, let's mobilize the National Guard and the police. So on Friday night, as the storm began to roll in, we were out in the streets, and it felt a lot like the curfew in the sense that nobody was out because they were all prepared for this blizzard, but police were out as much as they were out during the uprising. And from what we saw, though we've never had it really confirmed for us, there were arrests, and that allegedly some convenience stores or food stores and pharmacies were allegedly broken into, and there were arrests made. But primarily they had the National Guard out patrolling our streets for the entire weekend. But nothing else was done. Nothing else was done whatsoever. And I'll talk a little bit more about that, but essentially in some ways, when it came to working people and poor people, there was a collapse in the system. The People's Power Assembly, though, I'll talk a little bit, I'll transition and talk a little bit about that, because I don't know if I have to belabor the problems with the system. I'm talking to revolutionary socialists in the audience here, and I'm sure that you're all very clear of the disparity in treatment and from the working class neighborhoods to the very, very wealthy neighborhoods. But I wanted to talk a little bit about what the People's Power Assembly was able to do or did do. As an organization representing the people, and I won't go through the history of that, I'm hoping that everybody knows or understands the history of the People's Power Assembly. There's an assembly operating in New York City that's done splendid work, and I don't know if any of the PPA people from New York are there that have been fighting the Black Lives Matter, struggle with all their heart and soul against police terror. And of course, many of y'all were down here when we were fighting around the Freddie Gray case. against his brutal murder by the Baltimore City Police Department. But we anticipated this, and so we had mobilized. We did more likely than the mayor did in the city, and we're getting out information to people about emergency measures. Even the smallest thing, like telling people to remove their snow from their doors so that it didn't pile up and they were trapped in their homes. The city didn't even get that basic information out. They didn't get any kind of information out. Not where people could go, what would happen if, the utilities went out and the electricity went out, which we understand from reports that we got from Cherry Hill that 300 people were without power. So there was very little preparation. So by Sunday night, we're fortunate. We live near, many of us, some of the members live near our office. And our office, people been there, is sort of located close to the business area, which is an advantage for us because it means that electricity, even if you lose it, is still on here. So we kept the office open, and on Sunday, once blizzard conditions were over with, we got down here and began phone banking all of, our members, contacts, and friends. We had been engaged in a campaign and housing projects where we had gone door to door. People had invited us in. People may be familiar with the sex for repair scandal where people living in the housing projects, mostly black women, were forced if they wanted repairs to be done to have sex with repair people. So there was a big scandal here, and it broke nationally, and there were 30,000 people signed up to fire Graziano. But that was just one aspect of it. The conditions in the housing projects, these crises is widespread. And so we went door to door in 5 of the major housing projects in Baltimore City and had about 300 people who signed up. So on Sunday, we called those folks. We're having an advantage because Johns Hopkins University, which includes the School of Hygiene, which some folks in New York may be familiar with, and the Maryland Art Institute, which is Torrey's college, are within walking distance from our headquarters. And so on Sunday, we were jammed with students who actually helped us get through with phone banking, not only the hundreds of people in the projects, but we had a list of about 1,000 people since the Trayvon Martin March that we were able to get through to make sure that people were okay. We reached out to other progressive and left organizations with some success. Not all participated, but we were able to get some nurses to be on call and make sure that everybody was okay and safe. So we called everybody up, but in the course of the calling people, and by the way, we wanted to be able to dig people out because a lot of young people had energy, and some of us older people have energy still. So, we went out to the projects that night digging people out, especially disabled people, because no provisions were made for that whatsoever. But we got through, and that first night we ended up at Gilmore Homes till around 10 o'clock. But as I was beginning to say, the big major problem was food. People were running out of food, and they didn't have anything to eat because the city made no provisions for it. So while we had no illusion, we still have no illusion, it wasn't our intention that the PPA can feed everybody. Nevertheless, we did a food drive and got food out to those who we talked directly to that needed food. We worked in conjunction with Reverend Witherspoon in Gilmore Homes, which is Freddie Gray's neighborhood, and we were able to get out to about 4 or 5 different housing projects that probably don't mean much in terms of their names to Baltimore, to the New York comrades. But primarily, we pushed to demand that the city government release the food at the Maryland Food Bank and take it directly to the neighborhood. And I got to say that, the city was lined up against us on this. we called a press conference, and the mayor responded by calling a press conference at the same time, which whited out pretty much until the next day any publicity about our demands that they feed the people. And in the course of it, one brave reporter came forward, so most of our work was with social media, which we want to thank Amani, Greg Butterfield, and others who helped us get the information out, and we got out by Twitter and Facebook what was going on. But it's amazing because for those who are familiar with Baltimore, we get a lot of TV coverage on a lot of what we do. But in this case, when we called the press conference and demanded the city do this, they didn't respond. They didn't come out. And, of course, like I said, the mayor was holding her press conference saying that people could call 211, and mostly talking about how they were going to clean up the street. They kind of ignored the issue. But one reporter, an independent journalist, picked up the story, and he also revealed that through a Freedom of Information Act that he had filed during the uprising, and people can see it for themselves, there was an email that went between the mayor's emergency management people who we talked to since then, and the food bank, where the food bank wanted to give food to the community during the uprising. And basically the mayor's office said that they didn't want the food for the people. This is word for word. I could read it to you. That if anything, the need for food was to feed all the out-of-town police that were in the city. It's a fact. So, like we said, it was feed the cops, not the people. That was their views. I mean, it's kind of amazing and absolutely absurd. And it isn't even very real because food bank food isn't the kind of stuff that Top on the Beat could even eat. Number one, you have to be prepared. So it was their hatred towards the oppressed communities, their hatred towards poor people and working class people, which is what came through in the series of emails that came out. So at this point, I mean, we've pushed out our demands in every possible way, and we have been able to feed as many people that, we are responsible for within the orbit of this PPA. So I think our next stage of the struggle, and I'm going to show you some pictures. I hope they don't come out like on Facebook where they say my name is Sharon Black kind of pictures, but our next stage really has been to demand that the governor and the mayor use their emergency powers to address the crisis of Baltimore, Maryland's low-wage workers. I mean, we want them to release the emergency food stamps to our workers in need, to issue stipends and emergency unemployment benefits, to temporarily suspend restrictions and qualifications so as to allow people in need to access special benefits, to suspend the regular red tape and special rules to allow state workers to speedily authorize benefits, and to set up temporary satellite sites to distribute benefits. In addition, the state needs to open food warehouses and get food out to anyone in need without red tape. I'm going to end by saying we also mentioned here, which we are now pushing out, that they are spending $2.9 million, the state is, along with some other rich benefactors, the Underarm, I can't pronounce them, but the people who make the clothing for sports. And the city's paying about close to $1 million to, hear this, Thomas, rebuild the Western District Police Station where Freddie Gray was murdered. So they couldn't feed the people in that neighborhood, but they can build a brand new close to $3 million police station, and that's what they're spending the money on. Now, to talk about the conditions why people couldn't eat, is there is a food desert in the city from west to east Baltimore. And so by the time the storm had lifted, from direct reports and eyewitness accounts and ourselves, the shelves were wiped clean because there are no big major giant food markets, places where people could get food. And so there was nothing left for people, even if they had money, to even buy and they couldn't get to the other major markets that were either in different areas of the city or out in the county because the buses weren't running. On top of that, the housing commissioner, who was the same person responsible, who makes $300,000 a year, who, by the way, came from New York City, Graziano, a totally disgustingly homophobic, sexist commissioner, got on the news to tell people that they were going to be fined $50 if they didn't shovel off their walkways. Of course, no shovels are given out to people, and nothing's done, no free salt, nothing like that. And the housing commissioner, who was responsible for the housing projects, I'll show you a picture where Stephen and Renee and some others had to go into East Baltimore, and if you can see that at all, had to shovel out a disabled person who was stuck in his apartment, which is dangerous to people with health problems. So this same housing commissioner who was threatening the people of Baltimore was fined, didn't even clean out the sidewalks or clean up the sidewalks or help the people in the housing projects that he's responsible for. This is Renee. I mean, these are some of the pictures. I don't know if they came out okay. I've got to confess that we've run out of white paper here, so I'm using yellow for print stuff. And this is some of the food. But anyhow, the Congress consents for my report, I think. The absolute capitalist neglect. I mean, when you look at these crises, they're going to come more and more, and capitalism more and more is unable to deal with them. I mean, the honest solution is revolution and socialism. I mean, that is the honest solution for all this. The job of the PPA is to represent the people and in many ways start to organize folks block by block. What the Cuban people do with the Committees for the Defense of the Revolution and what way they're organized, they don't lose people during major hurricanes or disasters or these kinds of things because of the way they're organized. So while we're fighting for socialism and for revolution, at the same time the PPA is, organizing the people to defend themselves in any way possible. I could go on a little bit more about the police brutality and terror struggle. We've been demanding that they disarm and disband the racist police. We've taken up the demand from Mami Abu-Jamal, who thinks that he's raised around organizing peace patrols. But in the interim, we're talking about forming a coalition to hold people's assemblies to act as real, what was formerly the civilian review boards who've been in the back pocket of the police in the city. So I think I'm going to stop there. I would just say to the audience, because I know I'm speaking to revolutionaries, that a couple of the things, I think that the People's Power Assembly did amazing on Sunday in terms of really being able to talk to everybody on the phone and build solidarity and unity, because that was our slogan, the answer to the capitalist, the failure of capitalism and racism is really solidarity and unity. It was harder to put the pressure on the mayor and the city because even organizing a demonstration in these conditions has been very, very difficult. So we did our very best in that. I think where we're at right now, as I said, is pushing the demands of low-wage workers right now. The governor has put out a new agenda. They want to build this is not a joke, they want to build a brand new prison complex in Baltimore City, and they want to cut $34 million from the educational budget. So there's a lot of things really happening right now, and that's what we're going to. The direction that we're going in is fighting on those issues. What we really gained that sync, or what was to me most remarkable, and that's why I really wish Tori or Lene could be here, was that we were able to build a lot of solidarity between the young students and some young workers who lived here, young people, who were willing to come forward and were enthusiastic about showing solidarity and unity in the community and doing this hard work of digging people out. It's also probably why I got to be frank with you that we have our Workers' World meeting on Sunday and a PPA meeting on Wednesday, but they're not here in the office with me because most of them have collapsed, because they have really honestly worked day and night doing the shoveling and, helping all this happen. So I'm going to shut down. It's kind of weird talking in this little mic and then it's echoing, and I can't see you all that much, so you all might be falling asleep by now. So if people have any questions, I hope I didn't talk too long, Sue. But that's it. There's probably stuff I missed, but I really hope that you all are safe and warm, and I read about the struggles in New York and write on,